Guys, that's the first piece of news that we're getting in as far as the cabinet is concerned. This was, of course, expected. As CNBC TV 18 Sapna Das has been reporting, the GST amendment bill was taken to the cabinet today. It has been given the cabinet's approval. Joining us now is Congress leader Randeep Singh Surjewala to take us through what the Congress's strategy is going to be. Mr. Surjewala, we understand that the cabinet has cleared the amendment to the goods and services tax bill. Essentially, that one amendment that the GST panel had recommended, which was to commit the central government to a 5-year compensation for the constitutional amendment for GST. Can we now assume that the GST is one step closer to reality?
Shireen, the truth is that GST bill as is being proposed by this government is pitted with compromises, exclusions and exceptions, thereby nullifying the very purpose of GST. Congress has given a dissent note in consultation with other political parties, as also various economists, and that dissent note is appended to the report of the committee. We will continue to ensure that unless and until those reservations which actually nullify the quest for a common GST are taken care of at the parliament level, the bill in its current form is not passed, because it will do more harm than good to the country's economy.
Okay, so you're saying that Congress will not change its mind and you will not support the passage of the bill in the Rajya Sabha if at all the Rajya Sabha is allowed to function?
Congress is the original author of the GST bill. We mooted the proposal. It is the likes of Srimati Sushma Swaraj and Shri Arun Jaitley, both of whom were leaders of opposition leading the BJP, who did not permit a GST bill to be passed. So we stand in favor of a GST for this country in order for the country's growth and a common market.
But Mr. Surjewala, the constitutional amendment bill is now, that has been cleared by cabinet, is minus the amendments that have been moved by the Congress party. The only amendment that the government has moved is the compensation amendment. So will you support the GST bill in its current avatar if the Rajya Sabha were to be allowed to function? Straight question, sir.
We want a true GST bill to come. Mr. Modi, in his own arrogance of power, is not permitting GST bill to come in the shape that is beneficial for the country's economy and growth. If you are going to have a GST bill that is pitted with compromises, exclusions and exceptions, which will nullify the very purpose of GST, it is of irrelevance. And that is why we are bringing in those amendments.
All right, that's Randeep Singh Surjewala. Mr. Surjewala, hang in there. The other piece of information that we are getting is, as CNBC TV 18 has been reporting, is that the National Investment Infrastructure Fund, which was announced in the budget, has also been approved by the cabinet. Joining us now for a quick reaction, Vinayak Chatterjee. Vinayak, appreciate you joining us. The finance minister had made the announcement of the National Investment in Infra Fund in the budget. They'd allocated 20,000 crore rupees to that fund. We understand now that the cabinet has cleared the NIIF. Your first reaction?
Shireen, I am extremely happy because this NIIF, the National Infrastructure and Investment Fund, has a great ability to catalyze the growth in the infrastructure sector and improve the mood and do all the things which we are waiting for. A few quick points. One, the 20,000 crores was set aside by the budget. Since the budget has been cleared by Parliament, I take it that the 20,000 crore seed capital is automatically sanctioned. The budget speech also mentioned that it has the capacity to leverage itself 10 times, which means that the size of the fund can easily be 200,000 crores. This can impact both public expenditure in infrastructure, and it can also provide the government seed capital for PPPs. More importantly, there are many countries who are willing to take a bet on and invest in India's infrastructure growth. And this is really the result of our Prime Minister Modi's very successful international outreach. And therefore, these countries could possibly be also persuaded to invest in the NIIF, which is a kind of a sovereign fund dedicated to Indian infrastructure. But it provides an opportunity and a vehicle for many other friendly countries to invest and participate in leveraging this fund upwards. So net-net, it is a major breakthrough for the Indian infrastructure sector, and I'm sure it will make us all happy.
Vinay Chatterjee, I want to talk to you about the international participation that you just mentioned. Do you see sovereign funds participating in the NIIF?
You know, some countries have sovereign funds and some don't, but they have their own vehicles of making investments. For example, Japan invests in Indian infrastructure through JICA. So similar other countries, then Abu Dhabi has its own fund, and Saudi Arabia has their own sovereign fund. These are countries that have for years been telling the government that tell us how we can invest along with you for infra development. So now we have a clear answer saying, yes, you can participate in the NIIF. And I hope that the government sets up NIIF with a professional board, professional management, so that the investments and decisions are all professional and correct in the long term.
Okay, Vinayak, hang in. I will come back to you. Mr. Surjewala, coming back to you. If I can ask you this, till Saturday it seemed like it was curtains as far as the GST bill was concerned. But today there seems to be a ray of hope. We understand from our sources that some sort of back-channel conversation has taken place between the Congress party and the government. Is there hope for the GST bill in the monsoon session? A clear answer, sir.
I completely reject suggestions of any back-channel negotiation. GST should be brought in national interest, in the interest of economy and growth of this country. And we, Congress, would ensure that a true GST bill, which will take into account all those concerns which are not of the Congress party, but also of the economists and various states, all the stakeholders, are taken care of and become part and parcel of the GST bill. Mr. Modi and his government should also not stand on false ego and do something that is in national interest and in the interest of our economy and growth.
Okay, Mr. Surjewala, hang in there. I've also got Satya Poddar joining us, of course, indirect tax expert. Mr. Poddar, appreciate you joining us. Let me first get your take as far as the alternate investment fund is concerned, and then I'll talk to you about the GST. We understand that the cabinet has given its nod to allowing foreign investment in the alternative investment funds. Downstream investments by such AIFs will be in accordance with the extant FDI policy, will be subject to sectoral caps and conditionalities. What do you make of this, and how significant is this decision?
To be honest, I haven't been following the AIF issue very closely recently, so I suggest that...
Okay. Let me ask you then about the GST, because, you know, now it's really a political call. It's a political decision. It has nothing to do with the amendments. There's only one significant amendment that the government has moved, which the cabinet has now approved, which is commitment from the centre to compensate states up to 5 years. It will now depend on whether the Congress plays ball or not. Do you believe that the GST is closer to reality today?
Well, I think I echo the comments made by Mr. Bhalla. The GST has become a political issue, an ego issue. To me, that's unfortunate, because Congress party or any industry representations made before the select panel of Rajya Sabha, they were very sensible recommendations. They were not asking for concessions. They were not asking for the tax relief. All they were asking for was that if the GST is to serve the purpose of providing a boost to the Indian economy, it should not be a name changer, but real game changer. And the way the government has chosen to basically go forward is to stay with the status quo. Is status quo in terms of what was originally proposed in the constitutional bill. There are lots of flaws, technical flaws in the constitutional bill, and the government is not even prepared to make those technical flaws taken care of, which is absolutely ridiculous. And forget about the economic flaws, because there are so many exclusions, and all that the industry was asking that if you want to exclude any sectors from the scope of the GST, don't block them under the Constitution. Block them under the GST Council decisions.
In a sense, then, Satya Poddar, you're actually echoing what the Congress is saying.
Well, whether it's the Congress or anybody else, this is echoing the whole country's sentiments that if you want to make this such a fundamental change, don't go back to the old system. Don't stay with the legacy system. And the constitutional bill essentially narrows your choices down to the legacy system. There's absolutely no broadening of the base, no rationalization, and even a reduction in the tax will not take place. So how do you sort of endorse what they've done? And the Congress was simply echoing the sentiments expressed
echoing
by
what industry has been saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, Congress was echoing industry's viewpoint that there should be a pure GST. There shouldn't be this compromise version of the goods and services tax. But hang in there, Mr. Podar, because this really now boils down to politics. So let me go back to Randeep Surjewala, spokesperson for the Congress party. Mr. Surjewala, are you saying in its current avatar, you've asked for a pure GST, the government has said no can do. So are you saying in its current avatar, you will not support the bill in the Rajya Sabha?
Absolutely. If I may be permitted to just say 2 lines about what are our objections, all that we are saying, fix a ceiling rate under Article 246A so that GST Council does not put so much burden on consumer that it becomes cumbersome, and that we have put at 18%, which is very high. Why are you permitting states to levy additional 1% tax, which will make it market distorting, when you are giving 5-year 100% compensation to states? We are saying if I own a unit in one state, as also in another state, goods moving from my unit one state into another state, or also of collaborating partner, why should they be part and parcel of supply of goods, and why should they not be exempted in business interest? Why should products like tobacco, alcohol, other electricity supply be kept out of GST, and why should states not have 75% representation in GST? Why should GST not have a dispute settlement authority? Why should role of panchayats and municipalities and any losses that they will suffer, they should not become stakeholders in the buoyancy that will come from it? These are principal basic points without which a GST will become meaningless.
You're making a fair point. I don't think anyone will argue against that. In fact, Satya Podar, you just heard the Congress's point of view on why they're opposing the constitutional amendment bill as has been proposed by the government. And that's a sound economic logic. At this point in time, it seems like the Congress is not willing to change its mind on supporting this version of the bill in Parliament. So we don't know whether it will finally go through in the monsoon session or not. Mr. Podar?
Yeah, well, absolutely. My own feeling is that even if it goes through the Rajya Sabha in its current form, there's a very high probability that many of the dissenting states will object to it. And the way the constitutional bill is structured, and there's a very major technical flaw, it says that the states can simply relabel their existing taxes as GST and they can continue with it. So all of the time and effort that has been spent in negotiating a compromise system will come to a naught, because the constitutional bill does not require the states to adopt the GST that is recommended by the GST Council. Now, I find it absolutely bizarre that why should the government not accept that recommendation?
Okay. Hang in there, Mr. Podar. Let me bring in Krishan Arora of Grand Thornton. He joins us as well. Mr. Arora, one amendment moved by the government that has been cleared by the cabinet today. We understand that the government is at least preparing to be able to table the bill in the Rajya Sabha. We don't know finally if the Rajya Sabha will function. The Congress, Mr. Surjewala on air with us saying that the Congress wants a pure GST, will not support the current version, but a lot can change in the next next week as far as the Congress's position is concerned. But what's your take now on the possibility of the GST going through?
Well, I think I've been hearing Mr. Satya Podar as well, and I kind of agree with him on the views that there are certain things which probably need, to be looked into in detail as to how and what kind of exclusions which Congress has been talking about are addressed in this particular bill, because even if this approval has been granted, there are a lot of demands of the Congress which probably are becoming a big dampener, and these are certain changes which probably are relevant, where GST itself is a function of how neutral it is and what kind of exclusions are defined in it, And if those are the cases where, one is to be looking at, going through, I think it's going to be a complete, difficult proposition in terms of the way, I heard.
Let me ask you this, a straightforward fashion. Would you actually be disappointed if this bill were not to go through in the monsoon session, or would you be happy that this bill shouldn't go through in the monsoon session?
Well, I would be very happy if the bill would have gone through, but because that was the first thing which would have created some kind of movement in terms of how GST is to be looked at, and as far as the deadline of April 2016 is concerned, that is a separate issue altogether. So that's something which we still need to see. But at least this bill should have gone through this monsoon session, would have created that, the intent would have been there that if it should probably would have.
Mr. Would you agree? Would you agree with Krishan Arora? Because you've been pointing out several issues and flaws as far as the constitutional amendment bill is concerned. Would you actually like to see this version of the bill go through in this session?
I don't personally like it, and nor do I like it professionally. Only simple request I'm making is that any flaws should not be enshrined in the Constitution. Let the flaws be enshrined in the actual GST law approved by the GST Council, because the constitutional changes are cast in stone for a long period of time. So if the flaws are cast in the Constitution, then that's the end of the road. There's no hope of reviving the good system in the near future. If the flaws are enshrined in the system through the GST Council, then those are time-bound recommendations and they can be revisited. So, Mark, I'll be completely disappointed if the current version of the Constitution bill goes through, and if the flaws are shifted from the Constitution bill to the GST bill, then I'm fine with it.
Okay, all right. Let's see what fate this meets. But let's go across to our colleague Sapna Das. She's been tracking all the action. Sapna, so all those proposals have been cleared by the cabinet. Any more details that you're picking up, specifically when it comes to the NIIF, for instance? Sapna, can you hear us? Oh, we seem to have lost the line. She is still working the phones to try and get us more details. But as we've been reporting here on CNBC TV 18, we told you first, and it is now official, the cabinet has cleared the GST constitutional amendment bill, which will now head to Parliament, to the Rajya Sabha first, and then go to the Lok Sabha, because remember, an amendment has been moved and it needs to go back to the Lok Sabha. The question is whether the Congress will play ball as far as the Rajya Sabha is concerned. The other big story, of course, is the National Investment Infrastructure Fund. 20,000 crores was allocated to it, but the government was hoping that that can actually be leveraged by the government in order to sort of increase the corpus when it comes to infrastructure funding. That announcement was made in the budget, and that has been cleared by the cabinet today. And of course, the other proposal is as far as the alternate investment fund is concerned. Krishan, I don't know if you track the alternate investment fund story, but foreign investment into alternate investment funds, that has been given the go-ahead by the cabinet today. Would you have a reaction on that?
Well, I have not been tracking that as of today, at least. So maybe no comments as of now.
I just thought I would check with you. Is Sapna on air with us? No, we don't seem. Yes, we do have Sapna. Sapna, what details do you have for us?
Yes, so basically, just on the similar lines that we have been reporting, the one recommendation that has been picked up from the RS panel report on the GST Constitutional Amendment Bill is that the compensation to states will now be for 5 years and not just up to 5 years. But we also do understand that the other important areas which the RS had touched upon, that is basically to control the cascading impact of the 1% manufacturing tax and to take care of the revenue flows of local bodies like panchayats and municipalities. These are areas which will be dealt by the State Finance Ministers panel at a later stage. Their meeting could be held sometime towards the end of August. That's what we understand as of now. So most likely these are issues that will reflect at the time when the CGST and the SGST bills are being drafted. The model laws are still under discussion as of now, and the Empowered Committee of State Finance Ministers will also take their own view on that. So what we do understand is that as of now, one amendment has been incorporated in the new bill. Details are still awaited if there's anything else that the government is actually woven in. Apart from this, again, as we have been reporting earlier, the foreign investment in alternative investment funds in India, basically registered under SEBI, that has got the go-ahead. So it's all going to be the automatic route in terms of the pooling of the fund is concerned. However, in terms of the downstream investments, and that is what matters for an AIF, that will be governed as per the extent FDI policy, which means all the sectoral caps and sectoral conditionalities will remain. In sectors where there is an automatic approval route, right up to 100%, there will be no problem. But wherever it's an automatic route up to 49%, that will be fine. Anything beyond that will require FIPB approval. Apart from this, the setting up of the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund has also got the cabinet clearance. We understand as of now, it does not really talk about the basic equity capital that the government will be pulling in at this point in time, because half the financial year is over. So Finance Minister had very clearly indicated in the budget that 20,000 crores will be the size of the fund, but we still need to understand what will be the equity capital that will be put in by the government for the current financial year. Most likely the rules, regulation and these announcements will happen next week. They are very much on the radar, and the government would like to go ahead on that front ASAP.
All right, so we will have to wait for the details as far as the NIF is concerned. But as Sapna was pointing out, it was a budget announcement. The initial corpus was about 20,000 crore rupees. The NIF was to be leveraged by infra companies to raise debt and invest as equity in infra finance companies. So 3 big ticket decisions being taken by the cabinet today. Of course, as far as the GST is concerned, the jury is still out on whether this means that it is a step forward or not. Let's get wrap-up comments now from our panel of experts who are still with us. Krishan, we were talking about the kind of problems that the constitutional amendment bill still has. There are, of course, several unanswered questions. The revenue neutral rate, for instance, the panel headed by Arvind Subramaniam, the chief economic advisor, is expected to submit its report by the 10th of August. The Congress wanted 18% to be woven into the bill itself. The government is clear. It would like a rate of about 20%, if not lower. What's your own estimation?
I think as far as the rate is concerned, anything under 20 is welcome. That's something which is a positive news here. And because you look at the current taxation structure, and what was earlier proposed was an R&R of almost 27% would have been too exorbitant. And looking at the current rate structure of excise and service tax and VAT, I think 18 to 20% is an ideal rate structure for India as of now. If that is something which is being looked at, that's probably a very positive news.
All right, Krishan, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining us here with those details. Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this extended version of What's Hot, where the cabinet has now approved 3 big ticket decisions, but the details are still to be announced and made official by the government. Remember, Parliament is in session, so usually the briefings don't happen while Parliament is in session, but we will keep you updated as we go along. A quick break. We're back with you in 30 minutes on India Business Hour.